I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the situation in Venezuela is cause for serious concern. The protracted crisis in the country has had a grave impact on the population, with high levels of political polarization, growing humanitarian needs, and serious human rights concerns. And the economic situation in the country has become dire. Repeated efforts to bring the government and opposition to the negotiating table have not led to concrete agreements. The Secretary General has consistently stated the need for a credible and inclusive political process that has the interests of the Venezuelan people at heart. The situation has both an economic and political dimension. The population is affected in a systemic way. Nearly all 30 million Venezuelans are affected by hyperinflation and a collapse of real salaries, shortages of food, medicine, and basic supplies, deterioration of health and education services, deterioration of basic infrastructure such as water, electricity, transport, and urban services, drastic reduction in production capacities in the agricultural, pharmaceutical, and other sectors have aggravated the supply situation. The drop in oil prices recorded in recent years continued in 2018, with a decrease of about 500,000 barrels per day from 2017 and a consequent fall in revenues. The International Monetary Fund reported the inflation rate hit 1.37 million% last year and projected real GDP in 2019 of negative 18%. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, between 2015 and 2017, there were 3.7 million undernourished people in the country. Infant mortality rates doubled in recent years. According to UN estimates, over 3 million Venezuelans are now living abroad, including some 2.3 million who've left the country since 2015, going mostly to other South American countries. Mr. President, in the parliamentary elections of December 2015, the opposition won a large majority of seats in the National Assembly. Subsequently, the Supreme Court ruled that the Assembly was in contempt and that all its actions were null and void. In 2017, a National Constituent Assembly was established through elections in which the opposition parties did not participate. The National Constituent Assembly took over key functions of the legislative branch and undertook a process of constitutional reform that remains inconclusive and is not recognized by the opposition parties. Attempts to bring about political dialogue started as early as May 2016 through an initiative facilitated by 3 former presidents from the Dominican Republic, Panama, and Spain under the auspices of the Union of South American Nations. Despite some initial progress, no concrete agreements were reached through this initiative, which was suspended by the beginning of 2017. By mid-2017, there were efforts to resume dialogue, and formal talks began in September 2017, hosted by the Dominican Republic and with international accompaniment. Talks ended without agreement on February 2018. One of the major areas of disagreement was the electoral calendar and guarantees to ensure free, transparent, and credible elections. Subsequently, the government went ahead with presidential elections in May 2018. President Nicolas Maduro was declared the winner over 2 other candidates. Most of the opposition did not participate in the elections or recognize the results. On 10 January, Nicolas Maduro was sworn in as president for a second 6-year term. On 23 January, large-scale opposition protests culminated with Juan Guaido, president of the opposition-led National Assembly, announcing that he did not recognize President Maduro or his government. Mr. Guaido proclaimed himself interim president, pledging to form a transitional government and call for elections. While the protests were largely peaceful, there were incidents of violence. The Secretary General has expressed strong concern over reports of casualties, among demonstrators and has called for transparent and independent investigation of these incidents. According to the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, credible local sources have reported that at least 20 people have died in the unrest. Many more have been reportedly injured and detained in violent incidents. The High Commissioner stated yesterday, any violent incident resulting in death or injury should be subject to an independent and impartial investigation to find out whether there was excessive use of force by the authorities or if crimes have been committed by members of armed groups, pro-government or otherwise. I am extremely concerned, she said, that the situation in Venezuela may rapidly spiral out of control with catastrophic consequences. The High Commissioner also stressed that it is of utmost importance to uphold the right to peaceful assembly and refrain from excessive, disproportionate, and indiscriminate use of force. Mr. President, in a statement on 24 January, the Secretary General emphasized the urgency for all relevant actors to commit to inclusive and credible political dialogue to address the protracted crisis in the country with full respect for the rule of law and human rights. He has offered his good offices to help resolve the crisis. The main concern is the well-being of the Venezuelan people and their ability to enjoy their full rights. The UN has been providing assistance, particularly in the areas of health and nutrition, and the Secretary General had asked the International Organization for Migration and the UN High Commissioner for Refugees to establish a mechanism to support Venezuelans leaving the country. IOM and UNHCR appointed Mr. Eduardo Stein, former Vice President of Guatemala, as their joint representative to work with regional governments to ensure that support is in place to these individuals. As the Secretary General has stated, in this crucial moment, it is important that all actors exercise maximum restraint to avoid an escalation of violence and confrontation. There are divergent visions of what the future should hold for Venezuela, but we must all be guided by the pursuit of the well-being of the Venezuelan people and work together so that their needs are fully met. We must do all we can to prevent a worsening of tensions. And we must try to help bring about a political solution that will allow the country's citizens to enjoy peace, prosperity, and all their human rights. Thank you, Mr. President.
Gracias, señora.
Thank you, Madam DiCarlo, for your briefing.